Okay. So from this point, right, we're going to kind of like walk through it. Maybe this is a way that you could set this up, and it doesn't necessarily mean that this is the best way, but you need to find a way that works for you. But just know that this is a way, right? So we've already figured out the row totals. We've already figured out the column totals, right? So we're ahead, right? And so for this example, I'm just going to kind of like walk you through a couple ways that we go about that we could, maybe fix this, right? So this is not as simple as a 2x1 situation, but a 2x2. What this basically comes down to, right, is that it's kind of important to do a more complicated one, but just to kind of see where it's at, right, to kind of moving forward, right. So what we're going to end up doing, right, is that we'll kind of redraw this a little bit to allow for more space, right? So know that we're trying to find this observed and expected value. We're going to square it, divide by the expected value. And we know that the expected value is the row total times the column total divided by n, right? So it might seem intuitive, but we'll walk through step by step. So the first thing is what we have going on, right, is that we have D plus, so in favor of defunding police, versus D minus, not in favor of doing that. And for this first total, right, we have, oops, I guess we won't do that. We're going to try to keep the colors clear and simple so they're easy to follow, right? So we'll do like this kind of purple thing. And so we know, right, this is 175, and here is 330. And we also know, just for indication's sake, that this is for Trump. And then when we get to Biden, you'll see the reason for this spacing here in a second. But here, right, is that we have 210, and I guess it's just like a 100. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So 100. And so we've already figured out the row total here. So we're going to draw this out. It'll look something like that. Gives plenty of room. And we know that this is 385, 430, 505, and 310. So what we do in this kind of formula then, what we're going to try to do, right, is that we're going to first find this expected cell count for each one, which is the row total times the column total divided by n, which is, in this case is 810, right? So that's if we add these up, right? So the first thing we're going to do, right, is look at this first one, right? So what is the expected, cell count, right, for here? So this is going to be 385, because this is the row total, right, times 505. So that's the first part. And then we're going to divide that by n, the sample size, which is 810. We'll just stick to like with whole numbers, by the way, because some of these are kind of like goofy. So if we find the first one, right, we know that it is 240, right? So again, what we did first, if we look at this, so we multiply here times here and divide by n here in order to get this number, 240, right? It's really 240.0309, but we're just going to call it 240 for now, right? Just to keep things basic. On the exam or a question, make sure you have the decimal places, but in this case, we're just keeping the math simple to illustrate, right? Plus, who wants to write out all those decimal places, right? So the next one, right, is if we looked at this next one, this next cell down, right, where we have 430, but we're also again going to multiply by 505 and divide by 810. If we do that, right, this comes out to 268 and some change, right? Doesn't really matter, not the point, right? If we go into this cell right here, we see that this is going to be equal to 147, right? So it goes in that cell, or it's about 147. Again, I know there's some change, right? But not really. And then I haven't calculated this, but then we do 430 times 310 divided by 810. So we do that again. Let me type it out on my keyboard. 430 times 310 divided by 810. This is going to be about, 164, right? So far, so good, right? So now that we have all these expected counts that we're going to find, it's time to get into the actual figuring out the chi-square part and where the summation part comes in. Okay, so this is all we know. We're ignoring this other part. Let's start moving on from there. So we'll start with this first cell on the top left, right? So how do we set this up? So we'll pick a new color to show a new step. We'll go with this color, right? So what this first one's going to be, and you can see the kind of similar formula that's going to come up, right, is basically what we're doing, right? So we're going to do 175 minus 240. Yes, this is going to yield a negative number, but remember, right, what we're going to end up doing is squaring it anyway, right? So we don't really care so it doesn't matter if this is actually negative because we're squaring this at the top, and we're going to end up dividing by 240, right? Boom, first step, right? Now remember, what we're going to end up doing, right, is summing all of this together, right? So this is for that first cell, right? So we'll move left to right. So the next part that we're going to add, so this is going to be added, right? So all of these are added together. There is no, you don't do these individually and just like do nothing with it, right? These are all added together. So this is going to be 210 minus 147. We're going to square that and divide by the expected cell count, 147. So again, remember, like the O is this purple in this case, so 200, that's what we saw, that's what the data say, minus the expected count, what we think there should be if there's an assumption that that defunding police and who you voted for in the election are independent. So we think it should be 147, but we're looking at this deviation, right? So how strong is this deviation? So we take that, we're squaring it, and dividing by the expected cell count. We then, for our next one, right, we're going to add this to 330 minus 268 divided by 268, right? Because that is the expected cell count. And for our last one, we'll do this yellow again. We'll do plus 100 plus 164 divided by 164. And as a reminder, in case you didn't, I already saw two mistakes actually that I did. First one, right, is that this is supposed to be squared. And for this one, too, this is squared, right? So, again, this is all to figure out the chi-square value, right? So let's start doing that, right? So if we do 175 minus 240, so, okay. What does this break down again? So we'll call this was step 1, right? So now for step 2, just to illustrate the math again of what's actually happening. I know this can be kind of tedious for some people who've already figured this out, but I just want to walk through, make sure we're all on the same page. So we now have negative 65, right? And we're going to square it, divided by the expected cell count. Then if we move through, right, we have 210 minus 147 is 63. So 63 squared divided by 147. In this next one, 330 minus 268, 62. So plus 62 squared divided by 268. And, it's a addition. It's supposed to be subtraction. Thank God I caught that. So this is, again, a minus what you're supposed to do. Adding up, so this is going to be 64 squared divided by 164. Really important, right? Because we're doing this so many times to keep your mastery. You can see how easy it is to kind of mess up a little bit. So let's make sure that when you're doing this right, we're all doing the right thing, right? Does that look good so far? I think this looks pretty good so far. All right, so we'll go here for step 3, right? So what is negative 65 squared? It's going to be, negative 65 times negative 65. Yeah, okay. So don't raise it to the second power. Make sure you're multiplying it by itself. The math is different. Just be aware of that. So do it like multiplying it out. Don't just hit the square button because your calculator will do it wrong. Trust me. So what is this? So what do we get out of this, right? So we go back to, I guess it's that color, right? So this is going to end up being 4,225 divided by 240. This is going to be 63 times 63 is 3969 divided by 147. Then if we go here, it's 62 times 62, which is 3,844 divided by 268. And then we go back to our magic yellow color, which is 64 times 64, which is 4096 divided by 164, right? So far, so good. All right, so we're going to start moving on here now. So now we're going to add up all of these to get a final answer. We're going to change it to our final super duper color. So 4,225 divided by 240 is like 17.60417. And then we're going to add 3969 divided by 147. This is 27. 3844 divided by 268 plus 14.3428 and 4096 divided by 164 is 24.97561. So now that we have all this, we're going to add them all up because, again, when we look at the chi-square formula, right, this is a summation symbol, so we're adding all this stuff up. So then what's our final product, right, is 60417 plus 27 plus 14.3428 plus 24.97561. Boom. Which is going to yield a chi-square value. Again, fancy x equals 83.92258. So that's what we got. We solved one. We solved the puzzle, right? So we have this number right, but it doesn't really mean anything yet, right? So we need to add in a few things to kind of like sort this out, figure out where we need to go. So we'll cover that in the next